So let's just jump right in. We've all been taught the same basic story, right? That human civilization, as we know it, is about 6,000 years old. It's a nice, neat timeline that always starts with a few key things. First step, you've got cities. People start gathering together, building these massive communities, and living in one place. And then, the big one, of course, agriculture. We figure out how to grow our own food, which is what lets those cities really take off and thrive. And finally, you get monuments. These huge, incredible structures that prove you have complex social organization, a shared culture. You've basically mastered your environment. It all seems to follow this nice, clean, linear path.
But what if that whole story has a huge hole in it? Because if you go back 12,000 years, long before any of that was supposed to be possible, something happened. An event so unbelievably violent that it didn't just change the world. It looks like it completely erased a world that came before us.
To really understand what we might have lost, we have to go back. We have to look at the world as it was right at the end of a last ice age. And you know what? It was actually a time of incredible hope for the planet. So picture this. The Earth is finally warming up after thousands of years of cold. The massive ice sheets are pulling back, forests are exploding across the continents, and humanity is doing great. We're not just talking about scattered hunter-gatherers anymore. People were building semi-permanent settlements, hunting absolute giants like mammoths, and crucially, they were passing down knowledge through generations. This doesn't sound like primitive survival, it sounds like the beginning of something big. And then, in an instant, it all just stopped. In what is basically the blink of a geological eye, all of that amazing progress was thrown into a violent and catastrophic reversal. We can pin it down pretty precisely to about 12,900 years ago. The planet's warming trend didn't just slow down, it slammed into a wall and went into reverse. And the speed of this change is just mind-boggling. That warming climate, it plunged back into a deep freeze. All of that thriving megafauna, the mammoths, the saber-toothed cats, these incredible animals, they were driven into mass extinction. And those glaciers that were retreating, they stopped and they started advancing again. I mean, to put a number on it, in some parts of the northern hemisphere, the average temperature dropped by as much as 10 degrees Celsius. And the evidence suggests this wasn't over centuries. This might have happened in a single decade. Just try to imagine the world you know becoming an ice age in your own lifetime. Now, scientists have a name for this period. They call it the Younger Dryas. But honestly, that calm scientific name doesn't even begin to capture the sheer horror of what this must have been like for anything living through it. This wasn't just a climate shift, it was a complete and total system breakdown. The cost to life on Earth was just catastrophic. In North America alone, the extinction was almost total. Mammoths, saber-toothed cats, gone, vanished forever. Over 70% of all the big animal species were just wiped out. And for the human beings who depended on them for everything, entire cultures, entire ways of life were just erased from the face of the planet. So, the big question is, what could possibly cause a climate collapse so fast and so total? I mean, a sudden deep freeze like this it shouldn't happen naturally. And this kicks off a huge scientific detective story. For a long time, the standard theory was pretty tame. It involved a huge lake of glacial meltwater bursting, flooding the North Atlantic, and messing with the ocean currents that act like the planet's heating system. But a much darker, much more explosive theory has been gaining ground, the impact hypothesis. This one suggests that the Earth was hit hard by multiple fragments of a disintegrating comet. And here's the thing, there is compelling forensic evidence for this. You know, when scientists dig down into the sediment layers from exactly 12,900 years ago, they find this thin, dark layer. And in it, they find things like melted glass microspherules, tiny beads that could only be formed by incredible heat. They find a huge spike in platinum, which is rare on Earth but common in comets. And these clues aren't just in one spot. They're being found all over the globe. An event like that, a cosmic impact, it would have been an extinction-level event, no question. But humanity did survive, barely. And that brings us to the most fascinating part of the story, the forgotten survivors and the echoes of the world they lost. What if the people who lived through this carried more than just their lives forward? What if they carried the memory of the catastrophe itself? Just think about the world's oldest myths. So many of them talk about a world-ending flood. They tell stories of fire raining down from the sky, or legends of a sudden, brutal winter that killed everything. And the weirdest part? You find these exact same stories in ancient cultures that were separated by oceans, cultures that never, ever could have talked to each other. Is that just a coincidence? Or is it a shared, global trauma passed down for thousands of years? This leads us to one of the most baffling archaeological sites on the entire planet, a place called Göbekli Tepe in modern-day Turkey. Is it the world's first temple, like most archaeologists say? Or could it be something else entirely? A message from the past? Okay, this timeline, this is where it all gets really wild. Göbekli Tepe was built 11,600 years ago. That's just over 1,000 years after the cataclysm began. But look, it's 6,000 years before the pyramids of Giza. It even predates the invention of agriculture. How on earth did supposed simple hunter-gatherers build a massive, complex, astronomically aligned stone monument? The timeline just doesn't add up. Unless Göbekli Tepe was at the beginning of something, what if it was an act of rebuilding? A desperate project by the survivors to preserve the knowledge of their lost world. And this idea, it leads to a total, radical reframing of our entire human story. Maybe our civilization didn't just have one beginning. Maybe it had two. Maybe ours is the result of a reboot after a catastrophic system failure.
So, just ask yourself this question. What if everything we know, our cities, our farms, our writing, what if it wasn't humanity's first go at civilization? What if it's our second attempt, pieced together by the survivors of a forgotten apocalypse?
In this scenario, the Younger Dryas cataclysm acted as a kind of great filter. A more ancient, advanced, but maybe fragile civilization was almost completely erased. But a few pockets of survivors who still held on to critical knowledge, astronomy, engineering, maybe even the basics of agriculture, they managed to pass it on. What we call the dawn of civilization might have just been the moment that lost knowledge finally took root again and started to grow. You know, this isn't just a cool story about the ancient past. The Younger Dryas event is a pretty terrifying reminder of just how fragile our world really is. It proves, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that our planet's climate is not guaranteed to be stable. It can change, and it has changed, in an instant. And when it does, all our amazing progress and technology might not be what saves us. Which really just leaves us with this final, kind of haunting thought to chew on. Civilization may not be as old as we think, in one continuous line, but it also might not be nearly as new as we've always been told.